Welcome back, everyone. So I know we're learning so many new concepts in TypeScript, and it's very overwhelming. We learned about discriminating unions and their flaws in being used inside of the reducer pattern despite their popularity. We're learning about these type predicate functions that help us narrow down the type of variables inside of JavaScript world if they pass this type predicate function. In this video, we actually still have to learn 2 more types before we can start figuring out how to create that action creator extension. And what we need to learn is we need to learn intersection types, and we need to learn about the return type. So let's start with the intersection type. Let's say we had some type human, and this is just some type that has a name property that's equal to string. Let's say we also had some type alien, and on alien, it had the ability to fly, and it's a function, just a random function, doesn't really matter. What is a intersection type? An intersection is essentially the joining of 2 different types. So let's say we had some third type, hybrid, for example. And this is equal to human ampersand alien. The ampersand is going to be the intersection keyword. It's the type literal here. Hybrid, as you check, is now both a human and an alien. What this allows us to do is set some variable, let's say Josh, and it can be of that type hybrid. And now what you'll notice is that the value of Josh can have both the name as well as the fly method. This is possible because this hybrid type will have all of the properties and their respective types of both human and alien. If Josh was just a human, then you cannot have the fly method because fly cannot exist and assign on type human. Similarly, if Josh was an alien, then you can correspondingly guess that the name does not exist on type alien. But if he is both a human and an alien, then he can have both name and fly. That is essentially an intersection type. Very simple. It's kind of like merging 2 types together. Now, the other type that I was mentioning is return type. Let's say, for example, you had some function definition type. Let's call it myfunc, for example. Myfunc is just a function that returns you back a string. If I wanted the return type of myfunc, I actually currently don't know how to get it. The way I get it is I use a return type literal. So it's a very special keyword inside of TypeScript that lets me get the return type from a function and then set it to something. So let me call it myReturn. And this is equal to calling return type and then passing it some function type. Now it will reach into this type and then get the return and give that back to me and then set it to this type. If I hover over my return, I see it's a string. If myfunc, instead the return type of it is a number, then my return is a number. If we go back and we assumed that type human that we had earlier. If this is what myfunc returns, then the return type, well, again, will get it and give me that type. So this is what return type does for us. And we're going to now use both the intersection as well as this return type to create our matchable type. Now, the matchable type is essentially an extension on this action creator. Remember how I said every function in JavaScript is an object? We're going to attach on every action creator this match property. And what it does is it's going to reach into this function, get this return type action. And it's going to get on this action the type value. Now the type value is going to be equal to this specific value. And it's going to use that and compare it against any action we compare it against. So to do this, what we need to create is first this type. So I'm going to call this type matchable. Now, if you're confused, once I write it, just really look at it and really study it and understand what's happening. Because right now, I understand we're learning so many concepts, it's definitely overwhelming. But I guarantee you, once you understand it, it will all click and you'll be so much better equipped as a TypeScript developer. So again, we have some type matchable. It's going to take a generic AC. AC here stands for action creator. We know that this action creator is going to be some function that returns back any action. So as you can see here, we imported any action from Redux. It's literally just any action. It has some type that can be equivalent to a string or anything else. And it has a bunch of other properties, could be payload, could be additional meta tags. We know with Saga, it adds some additional stuff to these action objects. The key thing here is that any action literally says that it can have any number of fields. As you can see, any extra props, they're string values that point to anything. That's the any action. And it extends some action, which receives some type, which of anything, of course. For us, we use strings, or we can use enum values, doesn't really matter. But here, this is the definition. We are saying that we are getting some matchable, receives a generic action creator, which is an object that returns back any type. And what we want this matchable to be is, of course, the action creator's type. And we also want to intersect it against another type. And this type is going to have that type value where we're going to get the return type from the action creator. So we want to get the action itself. And off of this value, we want to get the type from the type property, which we can access using these square brackets. This will reach into the action, get the type value, and then take the type off of that value and set it to this type. So I know that seems very confusing, but this will make sense once we start using it. Once we start using it, all of it will be clear. Next, we have some match method, and this match method receives an action because, as I mentioned, we're going to be comparing our type now against this action. And what the match does, we haven't implemented yet, but essentially what it will do is it will narrow the type down. So this is where I mentioned before that we were using those type predicate functions where we narrow the scope of the type down. So as long as whatever match receives that action, once it passes that check, we want to say that this action is definitely of the return type of our action creator. So if our action creator is our fetch category start and it passes calling match on the action, if it passes, then we know for sure it's going to be of the fetch category start action. That's what this matchable is trying to define. So if that's confusing, don't worry. We're going to now write out the actual modification function that will give us back a matchable from an action creator. But for now, I want you to absorb the usage of the intersection, the usage of the return types, and what I talked about that this matchable does. I want you to sit with this, read this, and really understand what's happening here. As long as you understand enough of it, we'll move on to the next video where we will write the actual function overload that will use this matchable type and the passed-in action creator to create this new object that I'm talking about. So again, this is very challenging. This is rather advanced TypeScript. But as I mentioned with Redux, Redux and TypeScript is challenging by nature. So we're really flexing our knowledge on TypeScript. So let's keep learning, and in the next video, let's use our new matchable type. I'll see you in the next video.